We are back. I'm Matt Leck, with me, David Griscom, and joining us, Jathan Sadowski. He is a research fellow at the Monash Emerging Technologies Research Lab in Melbourne, Australia, so it's the future for him right now. He's also the co-host of the This Machine Kills podcast alongside previous Left Reckoning guest Edward Anguesso Jr. And he's also the author, most pertinent to this discussion, of Too Smart, How Digital Capitalism is Extracting Data, Controlling Our Lives, and Taking Over the World. Jathan, thank you for joining us from across the world this morning.
So happy to be here on Left Reckoning. I mean, I've been following Matt and David for a very long time, so I'm excited to actually talk to you guys.
It was mutual.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jathan, what has drawn me particularly to your guys' work at This Machine Kills is what drew me to New York, really, which is I went to NYU to study technology and society at the NYU Media, Culture, and Communication program. And when I was going there, there wasn't a whole lot it was very utopian, right? We were leaving, like, just a few years ago, it was those crazy Steve Jobs press conferences where the tech press would, go there, and it was literally like a religion. And now we're changing. I think things feel a little bit different. And I kind of want to lead into this question about how we think about technology, technological determinism versus Langdon Winner's conception of technopolitics. Because Langdon Winner's one of these guys that came up who was one of the few, along with Evgeny Morozov and a few other people, that were like actually saying something that I thought was worth paying NYU how much I was to expose me to. So yeah, technological determinism and technopolitics and tech as a discourse now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I think you're exactly right. In the time period that you were at NYU, those were some of the headiest days of the contemporary tech discourse, where like so much the tech media at that time were just like very much like handmaidens of Silicon Valley. Like, all tech media was essentially TechCrunch, right? It was just like reprinting press releases in the way that like the New York Times reprints like State Department talking points. Like the tech media was doing the same thing for like Google and Facebook and stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, you're right. It's only relatively recently that our ideas of technology are starting to get more intertwined with our ideas of politics, that these things are inherently entangled and you can't disentangle them. I mean, that is really like the basis of Langdon Winner, who was a really big figure in the philosophy and political theory of technology, wrote a landmark book that actually called Autonomous Technology, Techniques Out of Control as a Theme in Political Thought, that came out in the 70s. And actually on the TMK Patreon, we are doing a book club of that, where Ed and I are going through that book chapter by chapter every other week, discussing it, because it really is foundational. And so much of it is still super relevant for understanding what, as Winner calls it, is that technology is itself a political phenomenon. He calls technology a form of legislation in life, and he means that quite literally, in the sense that, like, it sets the rules for how we live. It creates processes for how we relate to each other. It is in every way a form of legislation that in many ways is more impactful and more powerful and more influential for our lives than most laws ever are. Versus what you're talking about with like the tech determinism angle, which I think is what we see a lot out of like our intuitive understanding of technology, which is like kind of really driven by the way tech companies tell us technology works, which is this thing that, like, it's this force unto itself. It has its own motivations and its own goals. It falls down from the sky like manna from heaven, and we just accept the gifts from the gods and Steve Jobs and all these people, right? Like, that is a very deterministic view. I'll just say, I'll wrap up. I'll quickly say, I always think of this book written by Kevin Kelly, who was one of the co-founders of Wired magazine, where name of his book is What Technology Wants. I mean, that's determinism, right? Technology doesn't want anything. but he claimed that you could trace with a straight line from the Big Bang to the BlackBerry, that all of these things were predetermined, and you could see them in some essence that he called technium. It's a lot of bullshit.
As you say that, like this, and I like the Civilization games, don't get me wrong, but it seems like the way that they uncover technology is actually reinforces that belief a little bit. David,
no, I was just saying that, like, I was having the exact same thought as you on that, right? And I think it's really important too, for people listening to this, like the reason we're talking about this determinism and the reason that it matters for politics, especially for emancipatory politics, is that a lot of people get a lot of mileage out of the idea of saying, like, oh, these machines that we're developing are just neutral, right? They're just making the world better. Whatever the effects that they have, whatever the damages they have, well, that's just, the consequence of human progress, rather than things being developed to meet specific needs. And in the world that we live in today, the specific needs are the ruling class and capital.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that to me is the very framework of technopolitics that, like, in a lot of ways I see my book, and quite explicitly in the beginning set it up as a kind of a spiritual successor to like Langdon Winter's work, a kind of updating of this technopolitics. And the way I kind of outline that framework, and you've nailed it exactly right, David, is that understanding technology as political means asking really critical questions around whose interests are represented, because all technologies materialize the interest of certain groups, of certain people, while at the same time excluding the interest of other people. And the idea that this is all deterministic or that technology is neutral is a really effective way of erasing all of those interests that have been embedded into the creation of that technology and the use of it.
And I think that kind of another thing, I guess maybe you're responding to with this book, is the Zuboff sort of the conception of digital capitalism. And I guess maybe that this is a good time to, I guess, outline your understanding of it.
Yeah. So very early on in the TMK run, we had an episode called Zuboff is a PSYOP, because we very much are critical of her kind of view of surveillance capitalism, because for her, the problem is the surveillance, not the capitalism. For her, she sees surveillance capitalism as what she calls a quote rogue mutation of capitalism, as like some kind of aberration of a more good, just what she calls advocacy oriented capitalism, which she holds up like Apple as the paragon of a good version of capitalism. She holds up pre-Alexa Amazon. Alexa was the bright line moment for Zuboff, where she was like, "Oh, Amazon is actually really bad now because they came out with this Alexa thing." It tells you everything you need to know.
There's one, maybe this is apocryphal, but is it true that Bezos got into the book business because of how much information you can gather from like the type of books people buy? I don't know if you've heard that, but that's one thing I heard.
What I heard is he got into the book business because it was just an economic decision about what commodity has high margins and moves a lot of product.
Also makes a lot of sense. And so let's move on to Smartness now, because Smartness did that. This was when I had gone through my NYU education, and it taught me not to trust any of this stuff. But it seems like that's been the new narrative. Like, you want everything to be smart. How should we be thinking about smarts? I mean, not that I mean, maybe we have some Alexa listeners, people listening to this on their Alexa right now, but I imagine people are a little bit skeptical. But anyway, how skeptical should people be?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely skeptical, right? I mean, the smartness has become like this ubiquitous buzzword. It's become the default for a lot of the things in our lives. I mean, in like a technical sense, we can understand smartness as things that are data driven, network connected, and automated, right? But now that's everything from like your toothbrush to your coffee maker to your car to entire factories, right? Like, it's all smart in that way. But at the end of the day, like that's a technical understanding of it. But I think, again, we really need to have this understanding of smartness as an ideology, It is really about creating this ideology of everything needs to be connected into like corporate servers. And the reason for that is that it makes everything into a listening device. You can collect a lot of data. It gives companies a lot of control over devices, right? Because like when something is smart, it usually means it has software embedded in it that actually makes it operate. But you never buy that software. You're always leasing it, right? Which gives the company a lot of power over what you think of as your property. And so it's a really quite insidious way of transferring a lot of value and power directly to the corporation. So it's no longer just a one-off transaction, but it's a continuous, constant relationship that you have with these corporations.
And no, and it's one of those things that it's wild to see a lot of the developments that you're getting, from like the app-based economy and like how they're relating to things that traditionally you thought that you owned. Like I make the point to people all the time. It's like, like maybe I'm a bit of a hipster, so it's okay. But like, I have a record collection or whatever. But functionally, like I really don't own that much music, despite spending like a lot of my income, relatively to what I did before these things like Spotify, Apple Music came around, right? I don't own that. In fact, I believe it was I can't remember if it was Amazon or one of the big streaming services says that if you buy a movie, you actually don't even own it outright either, right? I mean, it's just like an interesting development that we're having where, while you might feel that we have more access to a lot of products than ever before, the idea of property ownership in capitalism today is very, very much a fraught one, at least for people like us. When it comes to intellectual property, control of data, rich people have a lot more rights, I feel like, than they've enjoyed in the past. But for us, it's very much disappearing.
Yeah, totally. I wrote a paper that came out last year called "The Internet of Landlords," really looking at the way in which like digital platforms are enacting what I call new mechanisms of rentier capitalism. It is a kind of a huge resuscitation of rentier capitalism, but also this like explosion of landlords, right? Like we don't have one landlord that we pay rent to every day or every month to live in a house. We have like a proliferation of landlords that we pay constant rent to for the music we listen to, for the software and our toothbrush, right? Like all of these things, all these subscription models, all of this is rentier capitalism. And you're right, it is a way of shutting off even the rights that come with property ownership, right? The foundation of USA, and concentrating that in a smaller and smaller group of people.
And I just wanted to add to this too, because, the example we used right there was streaming services, right? But these developments that are technology, right? They expand to a lot of different parts of our lives. Like a big find, if you talk to people who are farmers, rural Americans, something that gets people fired up is the right to repair, right? Which is, essentially, the argument that if you own something, you should be able to go to whomever you want to be able to repair it. For people who aren't familiar, the more famous examples, like, getting your iPhone repaired is something that you really can't do. But what means more for rural Americans or people who work in agriculture, you own a tractor, right? You can only go to a certified shop to do it, to get it repaired, regardless of the fact that you outright own this machine in the first place, right? And that's just an example of how your property rights have been very, very much scaled back to accommodate the capabilities of a capitalist class of these big corporations to basically be able to monitor and surveil on like a mass scale people's ability to repair items that they've already bought.
Yeah, absolutely. The agriculture sector is a huge battleground for the right to repair, and as you say, the larger point around property ownership, because you buy a John Deere tractor, you spend $1 million to own a hunk of metal and rubber, while you're still leasing the software that's necessary for it to actually turn on and run. And you start doing unauthorized repairs on it, and John Deere will brick your tractor in the same way that Apple will brick your iPhone, right?
Mhm.
They will just revoke your software license. There was a court case about this a few years ago with Ford Motors, which does very similar things. And the general counsel for Ford said in this court case, it is our position that consumers lease software, not own software.
Gosh, well, kind of another industry that you see leading the way here is insurance. And David, if you could pull up the our friends from Lemonade Inc. that thread, because I want to read this for the podcast viewers too. So, yeah, just click the first picture there, and I'll just read those. Yeah. So Lemonade Inc. says, Lemonade is built on a digital substrate. We use bots and machine learning to make insurance instant, seamless, and delightful. This puts us at a data advantage. In fact, we collect about 100 times more data than traditional insurance carriers. Here's why that matters. I mean, to me, on top of the ethical stuff, it just sounds like a lot of work to me. But anyway, a typical homeowner's policy has 20 to 40 fields. Anyway, we kind of get the deal here. And everyone thought this was very concerned. This ultimately helps us lower our loss ratios, aka how much we pay out in claims versus how much we take in, and our overall operating costs in Q1 2017. Yeah. So, and then they had to come out and say, we deleted that awful thread, which they intended to be delightful, but it turned out to be awful. And they had to deny that their AI was going to engage in phrenology and other type of physiognomographic, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, sort of metrics. But I mean, I was reading like your book as this story came out, and it's just like, we could have had you on probably every single week and had a news peg that perfectly fits it, but this one is just too perfect. So I want your comments on it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's perfect as well because insurance and insurtech is low-key something I've been paying attention to for a very long time, because I have a very large-scale project currently in the works of focusing on doing a big study of insurtech. And so it's something I've been paying attention to and been following this company Lemonade, which is one of the they're a property insurance insurtech firm. They're one of the biggest, startups for this in the world, huge valuation. And this thread was super interesting to me because it was all familiar. I had already read all of this stuff in their own investor pitch documents, and I was really digging into the company as I'm wont to do, and I was like, I have read all this language around digital substrate, this flywheel of growth, and all of this. And the problem is what Lemonade, what this thread really demonstrates, and the pushback on it, is that Lemonade messed up because they accidentally tweeted out their investor pitch. Right? They didn't. It's not how they frame their technology usually to consumers, which is all about the typical stuff of we have these AI chatbots, AI Maya and AI Jim that do customer feedback and claims and automate all this, and it just makes it super convenient and frictionless and fast and efficient. All of that stuff. But all the stuff around loss ratio and this flywheel of growth, this is stuff that has been in their investor pitches for years. And I think what it really shows and demonstrates perfectly is that all of these companies have different ways of framing the same technology and their operations to different audiences, to investors, to the SEC, to consumers. They frame it very differently. And I think it is very revealing, and perhaps is also part of this general kind of techlash and general pushback and leftist attention on tech companies, is that we are starting to see how they frame themselves internally, how they frame themselves to investors, which I think is a much more accurate way of understanding their operations than the way that they frame themselves to consumers or to the SEC, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought that was really. I mean, I appreciated it as a producer of a show, because it's exactly this, like the section you say, like, watch the insurance industry to be particularly bad at this, and immediately, yeah.
Yeah,
you know,
and I mean, I will say as well, I mean, the what Lemonade is doing in insurtech is like a huge booming sector right now. The insurtech sector is growing very rapidly globally as both startups but also big incumbent insurers are starting to look at how can we use AI, how can we use data to do things like super personalized premium dynamic personalized premium adjustments, things like that. How can we, their ultimate goal that they're, one of their goals that they're really trying to get to is basically like, how can we use data from, for example, like your smart fridge to get access to information about like your eating habits, and use that as a way to change your healthcare premiums and, all of this. I think Progressive has called it in some of their documents around like their in-car tracking devices, the statistics of one, which is this idea that they will gather so much data about one person that they will be able to run statistical analysis on one person. It's a total like demutualization of insurance. It undermines the very purpose of insurance as a way of doing collective risk pooling by making it a hyper personalized, targeted service.
No, I think that's like it's extremely interesting to see. And again, to go back to the point you were making at the beginning, these things aren't neutral, right? These technologies are being utilized and developed with a specific goal in mind, not to make sure that everybody, the general public out there, is better insured and better, and their investments are better protected. No, it's to make sure that a bunch of investors can make more money from what seems to be a safer bet, right?
Yeah. So let's just address the guy that's like, I'm really healthy and I work out all the time, and I want my insurance company to see my eating habits. Like, I don't know, maybe your insurance company finds out about some health supplement that you've been trying, and all of a sudden you become a red flag too. So like, I don't know. I'm just, when you say that, I imagine like pulling out cash before getting fast food. Like
yeah. Start paying for your McDonald's in cash.
Or Bitcoin.